Hey, what's good, self-direct investors? I hope you're all doing great, and I want to welcome you back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jordan. I'm the mind behind Make More Capital, and today we're coming at you with This Week in Cannabis News from March 13th to the 19th. Now, before we jump in, if you enjoyed this video or you learned something, please just leave a like on it as it really helps out my channel. And of course, if you want to learn how to take advantage of this generational investment opportunity, subscribe below so that you don't miss any future videos. And then there's plenty of content for you to go back, rewatch, and educate yourself with. I've tried to put all the news and facts in one place so that you can watch episodes over time to learn about the evolution of the industry, identify top companies that you keep seeing pop up, and take advantage whenever you feel ready if you wish to do so. And we're going to start with this unexpected news that we got from the Treasury Secretary, as Janet Yellen was quoted saying that regulators are looking for solutions to banking law prohibitions against serving the cannabis industry. And we were not expecting this, but like Trump's highlights down here, expect the unexpected. If more can come from this, that would be awesome. We weren't expecting it, but we love to hear it. And so with that, from Nats Fertig, who writes for Politico, on Punchbowl News, or in Punchbowl News this AM, a nod to the Safe Banking Act Plus package that Sen Schumer still wants to move through Congress. Well, according to her, he still does. According to us, based on his actions, doesn't seem like he wants to, but good to hear. But according to Nats, in addition, Schmuck sees an opening to get cannabis banking legislation across the finish line this year. Now, we've heard that before, so take that with a grain of salt, but with Steve Daines, who as NRSC chair is trying to kick Schumer out of power. And so, assuming these actually come together, which is a big if, it would be massive, but Schumer clearly doesn't care about good policy that's going to save American lives because, oh, we have a whole bunch of bills. Are they going to be as cosmic and as groundbreaking as the last 2 years? Let me tell you, if you descheduled cannabis, that would be fucking groundbreaking, especially for pharmaceuticals' profit share. But no, that was the most significant yada yada, gonna go on to more virtue signaling. So a bit down here if you wanted to pause to read. But on top of that, we also heard this from Nats, new from me today in Cannabis Morning. So again, take this with a grain of salt because we don't know how true this is. They could easily just be saying this and kicking the can down the road and, dragging us along as we've seen in the past, sadly. But that has been pushed back by the Silicon Valley Bank crisis. Go figure. So annoying, which is expected to take up time on the Senate Banking Committee. And so you can pause to read a little bit more. But wanted to highlight what Mark says down here. I'm not completely out of the woods yet, but so Weldon was wrong, and I was right to be skeptical. No March legislation, surprise, surprise. And well, obviously that's sort of how we feel after being told that we're going to see something and we never get anything. I do still remain hopeful, but again, just relaying the news as it comes. And so, good news though, on top of Germany, a German official has confirmed that an updated cannabis legalization proposal is on its way. And so this is from High Times. Link will be in the description if you wanted to check it out, but also just wanted to share as Forbes covers the same story, so seeing more mainstream outlets highlight this, leads us to expect Germany is going to keep their word and actually introduce some legislation by the end of the month. Is Germany to introduce bill to legalize cannabis in the coming weeks? And ideally, it'd be before the end of the month. Obviously, sooner than later is better. But again, this link is below if you wanted to read more on this, which is confirming what we've been told in the past. And this one from Clear Cannabis Law Reform Study: global legalized cannabis market to grow from $22.3 billion in 2021 overall to $135.2 billion by 2030. And let me tell you, this will go a long way, or this would be somewhat accurate if Germany takes that final step, actually legalizes, and helps the world sort of get behind that and normalize the plant and end up doing the same sort of thing. And so obviously take these with a grain of salt. We've heard these before, but the link will be in the description if you wanted to read through it. But obviously with the world opening up as opposed to just the US and Canada and North America, the potential is massive. And then on top of that, Germany's Federal Joint Committee is set to announce major changes to the country's medical cannabis framework today. So this was expected on March 16th. These changes could significantly impact the growth rate of Europe's largest medical cannabis market. And so people were hoping that we weren't going to get some bad news of some new legislation that was going to hinder, the progress that the industry is seeing. But apparently, so I wanted to share from Nick Pateras, major news from Germany. The Federal Joint Committee has announced that there will be effectively no changes to the current medical cannabis insurance regime, which is good, better than making a negative change. Rather have no changes and keeping it as it is. And so huge sigh of relief. The GBA's initial proposal was to tighten some critical rules. And so just sharing this here for what it's worth if you wanted to read through it. But again, just highlighting that at least Germany is on track with somewhat keeping its word based on what they've told us. We do anticipate that they're going to, of course, legalize by the end of the month. So we will keep you updated. Legal weed sales projected to grow by 14% in 2023. And so this is from a BDSA report highlighting, and again, take these with a grain of salt because we see this every year, but gradually these numbers do go up as states reform their cannabis laws, more markets launch for adult use, and we see more, dollars being spent in the legal cannabis industry. And the company reports that global spending on legal cannabis increased by 4.8% to $32 billion in 2022, which is quite a jump up from what we're seeing here, the $22.3 billion globally in 2021. Not exactly sure who's right, but again, just sharing the news as it comes out. So take these with a grain of salt, but more on this report if you wanted to read through it. But again, as states reform their laws, we see more dollars being used to vote for legal cannabis, and I think that's the main trend and positive thing to take away from this. And so with that, good question, Todd. When will Medicare cover medical cannabis? Obviously, if cannabis is a medicine, it should be covered like any other medicine that you would get through insurance. So just bringing this up because it's a very fair question to ask, and as time goes on, I'm sure more people are going to ask it. So this is from the Washington Post addressing this. But many older adults are using medical cannabis to treat a variety of conditions, but it could be years before Medicare may cover the drug. Why? Just discrimination and keeping cannabis to Schedule 1. It's sad, but it is what it is. And so Washington Post link below if you wanted to read through that. And so with this, just wanted to share Weed Street 420. And so apparently TerrAscend will get a similar structure as Canopy USA, according to Jeffries. And this is in reference to TerrAscend's application to uplist on the Toronto Stock Exchange. And while we love to see one MSO starting the trend, and we'd love to see others follow, wanted to share this as Weed Street 420 likes to try and highlight as much of a bear case as possible. So just wanted to share it because we don't know what's going to happen. And his take is also worth considering. And so CGC requested NASDAQ listing and TSX listing. TerrAscend requested TSX listing only. At least one of them is wrong. NASDAQ listing isn't guaranteed for Canopy USA. And so it's worth considering. I want to read through this. I think I shared this in my last week's video, but this one was not necessarily shared, and this could provide more information on the situation. So here it is if you wanted to pause to read. Otherwise, link is in the description. But with that, TerrAscend did share their earnings, reporting their fourth quarter and full year 2022 net revenue. And so, again, not going to go through this as I'm not a financial advisor, but just going to share and you can pause to read. Otherwise, you can grab the link below. Fourth quarter 2022 financial highlights. A little bit more there if you want to pause to read. Full year 2022 financial highlights. More here if you want to pause to read. But most importantly, just wanted to highlight that this seems to be what you get when a new state like New Jersey comes online, but you only let dispensaries open 2 or 3 legal outlets to try and fight off the black market. Obviously not going to work, but that is why for the first time in many MSOs, we're seeing a jump from actually Q3 2022 of 66 million to Q4 69 million. And so obviously, if New Jersey was more lenient, if New York got their head out of their asses and actually wanted this industry to thrive, we could see a lot more sales to a lot of these companies. But again, just highlighting, I'm not a share owner in TerrAscend, so if you wanted to read more, grab the link below. But New Jersey, despite 3 dispensaries, doesn't go much of a long way, but it's still considerable, and that's what we're holding out for as states reform their laws. And so thank you Cannavestent though for doing the deeper dive. So if you are interested in a deeper dive in TerrAscend, it's available here. Slightly improved Q4 showing from TerrAscend to close out a tough year. Obviously there's a lot more factors in it, and they got to cut costs and do all that other stuff, but results were in line with consensus, and cash flow was improved despite a decline in margins. BS is improved following recent moves as TerrAscend looks to maximize profitability and prepare for potential TSX listing. And so that is a ways away still, but definitely news that we want to take in and consider as a positive. And so pause to read if you want to hear what Cannavestent has to say on TerrAscend's recent earnings. While we've got this interview from MJ Stock Trader, who did this interview with Air Wellness's new CEO, David Goubert. I did listen to it as a shareholder of Air Wellness. Obviously, he's just trying to sell the company and doing what he does. He recently bought shares, I think, in the open market, and since then his shares are down like 50%, maybe close to 80%. Obviously not ideal for him, but he's putting his money where his mouth is, and I respect that. Obviously, only time will tell. But for what it's worth, him buying these shares in the open market does highlight that he is putting his money where his mouth is, and obviously his job is to create more value out of this company so that it's worth a lot more in the future than it is now. And we'll just have to wait and see if he can pull that off. And so link below if you wanted to tune in. And then lastly, from Green Market Report, Cresco Labs CEO bullish on Columbia Care merger despite regulatory haze in New York. So it's a light week in news from the MSOs, but we do love to hear this. As Bactel noted, that some challenges to the deal are outside of the company's control. And as this has been pushed and delayed another 3 months, doesn't mean that the deal is out of the woods. And so you can pause to read anything here that you're interested in reading. But main thing to highlight at the bottom, the Diddy deal closing is perhaps the most significant concern as it promises to fund $180 million of cash for debt paydown post-closing. Colombo wrote, the transaction was inked before New York released its rules, which say that registered operators can only have 3 adult use dispensaries, Diddy would have 4, and that they can only be medical for 3 years after the first adult sales in the market. Is it possible that the deal could break over this? The crash of equity prices has also reduced the likely proceeds from other planned assets in Ohio, Maryland, and Florida. But if this is a deal that's been inked, it should be, set in stone, and obviously Diddy owes the company this for the assets. And so the net result is a combined company with more debt than initially planned at refinancing rates that continue to climb. Obviously, we couldn't have anticipated that, but still the deal has gone a long way down the tracks towards closing, Colombo added. So I wanted to share that. And for the record, I am a Cresco Lab shareholder, but this is not advice or anything. That's just my personal opinion. I believe in the long run that their brand is gonna be victorious in the country, and that's why I've put my money under them. So again, this is not advice, just sharing. But news we were expecting out of New York after all the delays that they've seen. New York cannabis agency sued by medical cannabis providers. You love to see it. Should have been doing this years ago, but better late than never, as a coalition that includes some of New York's medical cannabis companies is suing state regulators in an effort to open up licensing to all retail dispensary applicants immediately, because this would provide equal access to opportunity, what the communists or the neo-communists claim equity does, which it doesn't do. That just makes everyone equally poor by providing equal outcomes to everyone. And so the companies that are involved, including Curaleaf, Green Thumb, Acreage, and PharmaCann. PharmaCann, I do believe, has a big investment from a tobacco company. I think it's British American Tobacco. Either way, highlighting that some of these companies have said, fine, yeah, enough is enough. We're finally going to take this legal action. And based on the discrimination that they faced in New York, they'll likely win this case. And so it'll be interesting to watch this play out. But thank God they're finally taking a stand. And so with that, some good news out of state, so as well as DFCR, Doctors for Cannabis Regulation. News out of New Hampshire, as New Hampshire votes to legalize cannabis with no regulations or limitations. This is huge. Simply removes cannabis from the states listed of banned substances. That is essentially the best way to go about it, and so love to see this out of New Hampshire. Just wanted to highlight, because obviously we've seen solutions from many different states on how to go about doing this, but essentially just descheduling it from a list it never belonged in the first place seems to be the best approach. So I wanted to share this. This article from Marijuana Moment will be in the description if you wanted to read more, but it's the same article, just highlighting that at the same time, separate legalization legislation with provisions to tax and regulate cannabis sales is also advancing. So I'll share this more when we get this story about these possible bills to launch the adult use program out of New Hampshire. But again, love to see them just deschedule it without any regulations or limitations. That's how you should treat one of God's miracle plans. And so with that, Cannabis Times shares that medical cannabis legalization advances in Kentucky. Love to see that. Mitch McConnell probably doesn't, but we do. And then sadly dies in Kansas. And so more from MJ Biz Daily if you wanted to read through each markets. But I will update you as we get more color on how these are coming about and when they'll be implemented. And so with that, Tom Engel, thank you for sharing a Wisconsin Legislative Fiscal Bureau analysis prepared for the Senate. Minority Leader shows that state residents bought $121 million worth of legal cannabis in Illinois in 2022 alone. This is from people in Wisconsin. Massive. Contributing to about $36 million in tax revenue for Illinois that Wisconsin is missing out on because they have not legalized cannabis or reformed their laws. And so while it is silly, fortunately, the Wisconsin governor is pushing his legislature to try and come up with cannabis legislation and reform their laws. But until then, Illinois is just going to reap the benefits, sadly, and other states around there. And so, well, with that, sharing Hawaii and analysis projects that adult use cannabis sales could create 3,000 new jobs, raise over $80 million in annual tax revenue. And again, who wouldn't want this? While this is an older article from February 9th, I do apologize because I like to try and keep the stories as fresh as possible. It just highlights the benefits of ending cannabis prohibition that the prohibitionists will not tell you: the jobs, the tax revenue, and the opportunity as people get access to a safer, non-addictive medicinal alternative. And with that, Tom Engel, thanks for sharing. Colorado Gov Jared Polis says he's requesting an update on the timeline for the federal government's cannabis scheduling review from Health and Human Services Secretary Xavier Becerra. So thank you, Jared Polis, for keeping the pressure on. Obviously, we'd love to see more governors unite and do this and call for this because, of course, when the Biden administration makes a claim, they don't act on it, as they've done for years. You want to hold them accountable and put their feet to the fire, because obviously every day that goes on that they don't deschedule cannabis, there are more dire consequences, and that sadly involves American lives. And so article below if you wanted to read through that. While Connoisseurs sharing this out of Alabama, another market we least expect it, but making some progress, which we love to see. Alabama Medical Cannabis Commission, apparently their next public meeting is scheduled for April 13th, which is next month. Initial licenses are scheduled to be granted on June 12th, and then licenses are scheduled to be issued on July 10th. So not exactly sure when they're going to launch this medical program, but love to see red states like Alabama, where we're not expecting it, allow medical cannabis as a start. It's a step in the right direction. And with that, Florida politics sharing bill allowing telehealth prescriptions for medical cannabis blazes to the House floor. And so, might not expect this out of Florida, but apparently temporary allowances during the pandemic and after Hurricane Ian didn't lead to any problems, which we'd love to see. Test this out. Not too many problems. Good. We can continue building on it. The bill's Republican sponsor said, and so for that reason, it seems like they want to make this a thing. And so, just wanted to highlight, as again, Florida, a state that you consider red, a little bit less lean on cannabis, obviously seeing that there were no problems, so might as well keep something that has been working. And I'm definitely a proponent of something is not broken, there's no need to try and fix it. And so with that, sharing the news out of Florida's Office of Medical Cannabis Use for this past week, we can see dispensaries open from March 13th to the 17th. One company, Green Dragon, I do not know the parent company of that brand or of that organization, but they opened a new dispensary in Orange City. And so with that, qualified patient count increased to, we broke the 800,000 mark. Congrats, Florida, that's awesome. 800,000 100,356, which represents a week-over-week increase of 2,851, which we love to see. Numbers back up above that 2,500 healthy mark as people are getting a safer, non-addictive alternative to cannabis or to opioids in Florida in the form of cannabis. And so with that, dispensations from March 10th to the 16th, we can see all the MSOs listed in the state, the number of dispensing locations they have in operation, the number of milligrams of THC sold this past week, milligrams of CBD sold this past week, and ounces of smokable flower sold this past week. And so, of course, week over week, I will relay this information so you can keep track of Florida. But while we have Pierre Gilles, who's someone I will also put his updated comp sheets in the comments. But I also found this account from Cannasource.io is apparently they're creating various cannabis industry data visualizations. And so similar to what Pierre Gilles is doing, but more of a visual as opposed to just the numbers in the chart. And so hoping to launch by 4/20, so it's not ready yet, but just wanted to give a taste of how they're planning to present their information, because my view is just the more you can take in, the more data, it enhances your perspective to make better decisions. And so while this is older, from February 24th to the 2nd, highlights Trulieve is definitely the leader in Florida in adult use or in medical, and once they go adult use, that's going to have a large impact. But again, just sharing this a different way to take in the data and show you who is leading the way in Florida. But with that, wanted to share this one from High Times, and it does deserve a big wow. Who the fuck do the United Nations think they are? As the UN Narcotics Watchdog says, the U.S. adult use cannabis laws are out of sync with the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotics Drugs. Yeah, because this stupid convention created by the racist Harry J. Anslinger that really does not serve any beneficial purpose to humanity whatsoever ought to be disbanded, thrown out, and forgotten about. And so I wanted to share this timely comment from Cole Thomas because I do believe there's a lot of truth to it, and it becomes more clearer every day as the U.S. launched the global war on drugs through the UN, using it as a tool to spread their influence globally, sadly. Now the U.S. has finally admitted its utter failure, but the UN is still continuing the fight, holding on for dear life out of desperation. And so the U.S. has a historical obligation to spearhead a change to UN drug treaties, since they're the reason these treaties even exist. And so will we see any change? That's what we're paying attention and holding out for. But I think Germany being a domino and keeping their word and introducing that at the end of March will go a long way as we keep the pressure on, holding these politicians and these liars' feet to the fire. That's all we can really do. And as the momentum builds, we might see some change. But with that, some studies before we end off. The protective effect of cannabinoids against colorectal cancer, cachexia, through modulation of inflammation and immune responses. My bad if I butchered some of those words, no doubt I probably did, but another study from the future, May 2023, highlighting why we ought to deschedule cannabis so that we can research the medical benefits. Highlights here you can pause to read, but very science speak and hard to understand. But abstract cancer, cachexia, is a multi-factor disorder characterized by weight loss and muscle wasting, and there are currently no FDA-approved medications. And the study demonstrates that cannabinoids ameliorate T-cell infiltration, yada, yada, yada. Serum levels of the 6 cytokine signature might serve as a potential biomarker to detect the therapeutic effects of cannabinoids on CRC-associated cachexia. And so, sounds positive, but also just sounds like a reason why we ought to deschedule so we could study cannabis further for the medical benefits and not try to frame it and look for harms like the governments have done in the past and haven't been able to find any. And so with that, from normal, both current and lifetime cannabis use are associated with lower blood pressure levels. Who would have thought that? Counterintuitive, but again, apparently the data is in, doesn't lie, according to data published in the journal Nature Scientific Reports. And so we'll put the link below in the description. But lifetime heavy cannabis use was associated with decrease in both systolic and diastolic blood pressures. I don't know what systolic or diastolic blood pressure is, but imagine so many people over their lifetime try and reduce their blood pressure, and they go to the doctor and they're on prescription medication and they can't figure out why. Well, could cannabis be a solution all this time? Don't know, but reason to deschedule. And so, also sharing this one from Normal study, plant-derived cannabis oil is effective for symptom management in older patients with treatment-resistant neurological diseases. Sounds promising, and why we ought to deschedule. And so, full study essentially here you can pause to read, but authors concluded this retrospective medical record review describes the population characteristics of patients using medical cannabis at a clinic in Sydney, Australia, provides data on the effectiveness and safety of medical cannabis treatment on patient conditions and indications. Its findings indicate that medical cannabis in a balanced formulation may address a variety of non-cancer conditions and indications concurrently and can be safely prescribed by a medical doctor. Kind of goes against the whole schedule and classification when you say that cannabis is addictive, has no medical value, and can't be prescribed by a doctor. Turns out it does all those things. And lastly, from Normal, study investigators reported significant decreases in patients' cognitive impairments. We got another study yet again highlighting that THC-rich cannabis extracts is helpful for Alzheimer's symptoms. And think about how many people are trying to treat Alzheimer's with prescription medications when cannabis could be a much more beneficial medicine for them, helping make their lives better, the lives of their families better, helping make things better for everybody. And so while this is old news, thanks for pointing that out, Lost Links. Gotta highlight what Golf, Ski, and Trade says as, yeah, nope, no medical applications whatsoever. the biggest horseshit lie we've been fed for a sad, sad long time. But that is it for today's episode, folks. I want to thank you so much for tuning in. I really hope you got some value out of it. What did you think of the stories mentioned? Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or suggestions, and I'd be happy to try and address them. But besides that, if you enjoyed this video and you learned something, please just leave a like on it. Subscribe below if you don't want to miss any future videos, and I will catch you on Wednesday for a midweek update in the world of cannabis. Have a great weekend, everybody.